Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video in the Streamlit tutorial series on the Future Programmer YouTube channel. In this video, we will take what we have learned in the previous videos of this series, things like text elements and input widgets, and combine all of that into one simple project, which is a code screenshot maker. Without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. On my screen right here, I have two windows open. On the left, our source code. I have run the source code so that any change I make is going to be synced to the web browser on the right side. You can do this either through your terminal, through the command streamlit, run, and then the name of your file, which in this case I have named mine code screenshot maker, or if you're using Sublime Text and the Sublime Streamlit package, then you can use the build system Streamlit. Either way, once you have created a file and successfully built it, let's talk about what we want our program to do today. Our program is going to have three sections. The first of which is going to be ask for code format. We'll be asking for two things: the language of the code that the user wants to display and the line number, so whether we want to show the line numbers in our resulting code. And the second thing is going to be ask for code. So the user will have the option of either entering their code in a text area, a text box, or uploading their program as a file. And lastly, we'll display our code with the proper format and the proper content so that the user can screenshot it. Now, this isn't the most practical way of getting a screenshot of some code. This is more just a way for us to practice what we have learned in the previous lessons of this course. And we'll be using several things we learned in these lessons, like file uploaders, text areas, toggle buttons, checkboxes, and more. So let's begin. As always, let's first import the Streamlit package as st. And then let's take a look at each of these items one at a time. So let's first take a look at code. Let's first deal with the first option of entering our code, which is text area. So let's create a variable called code, which is equal to st.textArea. Our label is going to be simply code. Value, let's leave this as an empty string, and we'll delete the last two options since we don't need them. On the right side, we can see our text box has shown up and I can type in it. But let's leave this blank for now. And then after this, I can use st.code to show our code. So let's input the variable code with the language of, let's leave this as Python for now. We'll change this in a second. But for now, we have st.code, code, and language is equal to Python. Before this line, let me type in st.divider, which is just going to show this divider right here that you can barely see, but basically it will divide up the different sections of our program. And I'll do the same right here, because we'll have something before this, but we'll talk about that in a second. So here I can type in a line such as a print statement, hello world, and if I were to press Ctrl and Enter, we'll see our code shown right here, print, and then parentheses, hello world, and we can see the proper highlighting. This is blue and this is green, and we can also copy this code right here, and I can even delete this and paste this back in, and we'll see the code is still shown right here. So that's the first way of entering our code, by actually typing in our code. But oftentimes we write our programs in separate files on our computer. So what if the user wants to, let's say, upload their Python file or their Java file or C++ file onto this program, and we want to get the code from those files? Well, Streamlit also allows us to do this. Let's think about what we want to do to handle these two things existing simultaneously. Now, of course, you could have this be a mutually exclusive option, so you could either have text area or file uploading. You can't have both at the same time. But the way I'm going to handle this is I'll first be asking the user, do they want to upload a file to start? If they say no, then of course we'll just have the text area. But even if they say yes, then we'll allow them to upload the file. And after that, the user will still have the option to modify their code that they have uploaded in this text box right here. Now let's write this in code. So let's first start with a variable called upload file, which is equal to a checkbox. So st.checkbox, and we will have a label of upload file. So we're asking the user, do they want to upload a file? and we can leave the value as false by default, and we'll see our upload file button right here. I can click on it to check the box. If upload file is true, then we will say file is equal to st.fileuploader, and the label is going to be upload program file. We can leave the other two options as their default values, as we see right here. So now we see this pretty nice looking widget right here that allows us to browse files and upload some file from our computer. But before we can read our actual code from the file we upload, we first have to determine whether the user has uploaded a file. So if I were to write st.write file, we'll see none because I have not uploaded any file, so our file variable is currently none. And of course, we can't read any code from a non-type object, so we first have to check if file is not none. So if the user has uploaded something to our program, then we will say code is equal to file.read.decode UTF-8. Let me clear this out just for a second here, and I'm going to click on Browse Files. And I have created two programs ahead of time. I'm going to select our program.py file, and we can see the code is still empty. And the reason for that is right now our value is by default going to be an empty string. So I'm going to change this to a variable called code. Now you might notice that we don't have code defined if we don't upload the file. So if I were to remove this, we'll see name code is not defined. So I first have to define a variable called code, which is an empty string. So we have an initial value for code. If the user uploads a file, it is replaced with the content of that file. Otherwise, we'll just start off with an empty string. Now, let's click on Browse Files and click on the Python file right here, and we'll see, hello, you're reading some Python code, and then a function and the function call for that function. And we can see our code is properly formatted and highlighted in the box right here. And so now we have successfully handled the second task, which is asking for the code. We have text area and we have file upload. Both have been successfully programmed. Now let's talk about the language. So language right here. If I change the file from our Python file to our JavaScript file, you'll notice that the code still looks pretty nice. It still looks like, well, code, but the syntax highlighting is actually not exactly as it should be. And the reason for that is right now we're displaying this as a Python file because the language right here is a default Python. To correct this, we can use a variable called language, which is equal to st.textInput, so a smaller text box, and we will use the label of language, value of, let's leave this again as a Python default, and max characters, we don't care about this. At the end, I'm going to change this to a lowercase value because the options for language in Streamlit are all lowercase. So we now have the option of typing in our language. I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so we can see the code and the language at the same time. If I change this to JavaScript or JS, either way, and press enter, we will see nothing changing because right now I forgot to change the language option to match the variable. And once I save this, we will see console.log has changed to blue. And of course, this is a pretty minor change right here, but for other circumstances, this is going to be an important change. So we have the correct language for our different code. The last thing we're going to write in our program is line numbers. So right now our code is just one simple line, but what if we want to have, a couple hundred lines of code and we want to explain our code to a friend or colleague or something? It's probably helpful if we are to refer to the code by their line numbers. So let's show line numbers in our outputted code, but we want to ask the user if they want to see that or not. So let's say show line numbers is equal to sc.toggle. Our label is going to be show line numbers, and then value will be equal to false. And then here, we're going to add line numbers is equal to show line numbers. And we'll see we have a toggle right here, show line numbers, and we'll see the 1, which is the line number for our single line program, is going to toggle between hidden and visible. And if I were to change this to our Python file, we can see our 6-line program having the line button or not, depending on the option that we choose up here. And now we have completed all 3 of our objectives, which are pretty much the 3 sections of our code. And in 18 lines or 17 lines, we have created a pretty simple program that we can see right here that uses many of the different things that we learned in the previous lessons of this course. I would highly encourage you to look at the code that you've just written and play around with it and practice what you have learned about Streamlit and really add more to that program. Because after all, the best way of learning programming is to practice and to make projects. And one change I can already see that could be helpful to our program is automatically changing the language based on the file extension. So for example, I just changed our file to our Python file, but I forgot to change the language to match the py extension. And you could certainly do some quick research about the st.code function, and particularly the language parameter, and seeing how you can potentially match the file extension to the language. That way, every time someone uploads a new file, we could automatically detect the language of the code that could be contained within and change the language accordingly. As our final test, let's click on Browse Files, and I'm going to go to the actual place of our code screenshot maker, and we can see our code displayed right here. And I'm going to just take a quick screenshot of our code right here. And now our project has been officially completed. And that concludes our video. If you have any questions about this project, or Streamlit, or programming in general, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you found this video and the series to be educational and informative, please consider subscribing down below to the Future Programmer YouTube channel and sharing this video with your friends. With that said, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in more programming tutorials in the future. In the meanwhile, happy streamliting!